Hi there, it's piebypie, and I'm finally making this video. Earlier this year, I started a user experience and user interface design course as a part of a transition into a new career path, and I'm currently freelancing in this space. The purpose of this project was to do a personal exploration of all the UX process, and I thought Path of Exile made a really good space for me to sort of learn these skills, as well as exploring an area that I thought could maybe do with a revamp. Before we get stuck into it, I want to just define user experience and user interface, because I find that some people find UX and UI are the same thing, and they're not. UI is like the aesthetics, so it's like how it looks, maybe how you click on things. If you're on a phone app, it's like swiping things or doing that. And UX is how you feel about doing that, and also the journey that you go through to get to that endpoint. It's also everything that you experience as you from start to finish. So all of that is UX design, and UI is a way of delivering that to you. So the UX process has likes to use this thing called design thinking, and the design thinking way that people go about doing this is often referred to as the double diamond process. And the first part of this process is called discover. It's really simple. It's like you recognize a problem and you try to like explore and name it and really get clear on what that problem is. There's quite a few different parts to this process. I don't want to go into super detailed explanation of this, but I'll leave a link to this display deck in the description. Lots of words starting with D. Anyway, what we do is we scope out all of the elements related to the project. So, you know, if it's working with PoE, then we talk about who GGG is, what the point of the project is, how you're going to measure it, all the different things that we're responsible for, and what challenges might be there. Sometimes there's things like risks or assumptions. I just want to mention a few of the assumptions that I made as part of the project scoping. Players struggle to find the item they're looking for in the map tab, and players are frustrated with that product, the map tab. Players paid money for the current product and it's now outdated. So the map tab being a microtransaction that is paid for in the store versus other elements of the game which are included in the base game, which is free. And there's also like an assumption that GGG don't spend as much time updating all of the products working on, and instead they work on other parts of the game. Not sure that's something I can solve in the UX space though. Anyway, a really, really integral part of this discovery phase is the problem statement. So I'm just going to read this statement that I came up with, and let me know if you guys agree with this. Players of Path of Exile are frustrated because they cannot find and store items of a specific type, in this case maps, in a dedicated inventory tab designed for this purpose. Let that sink in. After defining what this problem is, it's really important to go about doing the user research process. So I'm a player of this game. I can't actually base everything on my own opinions though. As a designer, I need to be unbiased, and it's really important to talk to other people and see what they think about it. So I did 3 different types of research. I looked at some online surveys from respondents who were like prioritizing different things that they find important when they try to choose a map. I also conducted some one-on-one interviews with players that you might recognize, such as Noogie and Tarkycat. And I also ran a live stream sort of focus group against my project mentor's recommendation. He says that focus groups are really messy. Anyway, I got quite a bit of feedback in chat and kept a log from chat to use that information in further parts of this process. And speaking of further parts of that process, we're on to the second part of the double diamond, and that's called define. So that's when you take all of the research and you sort of try to drill it down into the most important bits. A really useful part of that is called affinity mapping. It's when you take all of the qualitative information in that research process and put them into themes. Often you might do this on post-it notes, in like physical post-it notes, and place them on whiteboards and stuff, and then group all of the things that are shared things. I found that a lot of people would repeat the same kind of sentiment, so I had to like remove a lot of the quotes from different people that I spoke to because there were so many recurring themes. So a lot of the themes were around like different types of content, tiers, user interface or interaction. So clicking was a really big concern. Content that affects individual maps, so things like Elder Guardian maps or Blighted maps came up a lot, and also Maven, whether a map has been witnessed by Maven. Keep in mind, I did this research around February or March, so it would date back to that iteration of Path of Exile, and we have had some updates since then. Farming Cirrus is also a really important part of this design because it had such a huge impact from 3.9 in introducing the Atlas regions, and also the Atlas regions, they are a huge part of the map tab, I think a weakness anyway. And my research also confirmed that. There is also this phase of empathy mapping, which can be helpful in trying to understand the player's concerns, particularly related to feelings, whether they be physical or emotional. So the clicking and also the frustration or anger were really big pieces there. My key research insights and findings were that players would have to rely on external tabs to organize specific maps. So like you'd have to like shift and put your Blighted maps in either the Blighted map tab or a dedicated tab for Blighted maps. Same thing with Guardians, same thing with if you were setting up a run tab or anything like that. Second observation was that key features of map items aren't searchable. It's probably important to note that it's not a search, it's actually a filter system. Anyway, some things are not attached as filterable tags to the maps themselves. And then final note, insight was multiple reference points are required to find the correct map item. So quite often you might have to pull up your atlas, socket the certain right of array of watchstones and mouse over everything and try to identify which map it is that you need to run, and then refer back to your tab, then go to your map device. And that's kind of tedious and cumbersome. Once you've had a really good discussion with a couple of users, you can actually start mapping out what their journey is like. And I tried to display this in a sort of a flow chart. Customer journeys can often be just like a linear journey. I sort of wanted to include the idea that there's multiple options, and that's sort of denoted in this area with the sort of turquoise maps, so like different use case scenarios. And probably the most important thing to note is that it's a cycle or a loop that you go through, so you will go back to the start and then do something else depending on what you want to do, and that there's quite a few pain points outlined with the red. Following on from that, I wanted to focus on, instead of using personas, I wanted to focus on jobs to be done. So like I said before, with the turquoise areas, there's quite a few different things that you can do in regards to mapping, and that changes how you want to interact with the map tab or map items. You've got early progression, completion bonus, watchstones and Cirrus, Shaper or Elder, Blighted maps, and Maven invitations. And all of those affect how and why and which maps you need to use. However, the map tab, it doesn't necessarily service all of those needs. I'm going to skip this a bit about design principles, but they are like guiding points to sort of keep in mind when coming up with solutions and drilling down into the next part of the process. But I do really want to talk about how might we statements, because they help come up with solutions as part of the next phase. So key how might we questions might be, how might we isolate special maps, specific maps that are different from a generic tile set, or how might we group maps based on the region they're located in the atlas. You'll see how I use these statements to inspire my solutions further down. So the third part of the double diamond process is sort of going into the options that we have to choose from, all the different types of solutions, and trying to come up with as many as possible. I was kind of crunched for time, so you'll see a couple of different iterations here. So first part was I actually tried to sort of turn my storyboard into a like shorter, less friction-filled feedback loop, and tried to drill it down to what the essentials were, and tried to sort of visualize what that might look like in terms of elements on the actual tab in that Crazy 8 sketch. It was extremely important to figure out what the MVP is, because the MVP in this case means minimum viable product. So the smallest amount of changes for the maximum amount of reward for the user. The two things that I thought would be the most rewarding changes would be the ability to filter by region and the ability to filter map items that have additional features, so Elder Guardians and Blight. The next part of this process, I sort of looked at a possible user flow, which ended up also being a little bit of a wireframe or a rough draft at UI, trying to sort of think about how different people would enter the points. I found that people might, depending on their needs, want to start at the top or enter anywhere they wanted, so that you didn't have to go linearly through the different parts of the filter. Here's another sort of go at sort of blocking out what sort of spaces they might occupy on a single tab. I found that also with this particular project, because I didn't have multiple screens to work with, it was about using space in an efficient manner, while also making it recognizable for players who've been experienced with the game already and knew what the map tab looked like before. Here's a couple of different sort of use cases. So you've got like the starting point, and then depending on what your needs are, this is how it should look or be interacted with. And then this is when we start sort of building and testing solutions in Figma, which is a platform you can use to build out testable prototypes, so people can click on them and actually navigate through them. And this is sort of how we started. I actually got access to some of the assets that are used in the game, and my design has evolved over time. I ran a little bit of really basic UI testing and said, hey, do you recognize the elements on this page, before I built out a clickable prototype that people could navigate through? The answer was mostly yes. And then I thought that with the region symbols being introduced over time, people would get used to using them. Even though I initially had them spelled out, I thought that they took up a lot of space for the amount of use that they actually provided. So I ran some prototype testing with 5 different people who I showed. I gave them the prototype and they were able to navigate through it and understand it. And they had, mostly positive feedback. One of the biggest things that was missing, I'll identify in a little bit, but for the most part, the usability testing proved that it was usable, just not 100% perfect for the game, and that's why we do user testing. Here's just a little screen cap of my artboards. So I have to build a different page for each of the different navigation points, but I learned a lot about how to use Figma, and I could definitely do a better job of this when I get to revisit it. And this is what I mentioned before about prototypes, so how you can navigate through them and have different items on the page associated with different results, aka different screen or different elements showing. At this point, I'm going to show you what the prototype actually looks like. This is the first page of the prototype. So we're looking at all the maps in Haworth Hamlet, and we're able to choose a certain set of maps from tier 14 to 16 from Tien's End, not Tien's End, Haworth Hamlet. We're also able to socket a watchstone and say, I only want to see maps that are 2 watchstone level, and we'll further my atlas progress that way. You can go all the way up to 4, or you unsocket them again. You can also look at influence items, or you can go to your Shaper or Elder Guardians here and then choose Elder, and then I can see my Elder Guardian maps. You can go back to looking at different types of completion so that you can filter by what you need to do next without having to refer to the atlas. There's also a menu option for the Maven invitations and a blighted map filter as well. Also, thing to note here is that I included the influence on the region button at the top so that you could tell that anything within there was influenced by whatever conqueror was present. Okay, so in conclusion, I think that my design did provide a lot of quality of life, and lots of people found it easy to find stuff. However, there was some stuff that was not present. The main thing being the individual tile set filter that happens underneath. And I've actually updated the UI to include that. This is a working sketch. In my updated UI, what I did was include the tile set filter and use that as an opportunity to show multiple tiers of tile sets, as well as if you were to deselect the regions, it would show pretty much every map tile set. Anyway, the other thing that I added in was an ability to select white, yellow, or red maps. I'm actually going to move that over here as part of the tier, like the slider section, and fully develop that slider. And I gave a split between Guardian and Shaper. So those were some of the major changes. And one of the major reasons I did this is because feedback I got from one of my users explained that at this level, you can select a certain item and a certain tile set and make it for sale for a certain price in any trade league. And I thought if I did remove that entirely, I'd be removing a user feature that's really quite important to the game. So my next steps would be I'd like to fully design that new prototype and then test it again, but I know that with 3.16 and 3.17 we're expecting a bunch of atlas changes, so I'm going to wait and see what that looks like and then have a go at redesigning my tab. I'll leave a link to the prototype in my description, and in the meantime, if you liked this video, please let me know what you think. Let me know about the design. If you want to know more, see more UX content on my channel, let me know. And maybe someone at GGG might find this helpful. I mean, God willing, I'd love to see a little update to the map tab. Anyway, some quality of life. We always beg for it. Hope to see you in the next one. Bye-bye.